Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Golf Chat Show Live. Now, I have a real treat for you today. We have Kieran Blay on the show, and we're going to be talking about how do you perform the best? How do the elite performers actually peak at the right times? That's always something I've found super interesting, and I know you have too. So, guys, if you are brand new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you throughout the rest of the show. Kieran, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
How are you doing?
Well, thanks. Although feeling a little bit like cabin fever's setting in with everything going on at the moment.
I'd have to agree. Now, before we get into the kind of golf and the sports side of it, you are a keen cyclist, and I have just got into cycling myself. So we've actually just spent the last 15 minutes talking about brand new bikes.
We have. We have. Have you ordered it yet?
No, I wish. I have to get the approval from the boss.
That's right. You can borrow one of mine, and then once it sets in that you can't do without it, you can order one.
You know what? I was thinking about this the other day. One of my next door neighbours, he's got like they look pretty expensive bikes to me. And I was just thinking that's just like must be like having a new car when you get one of those.
Yeah, you have to insure it for almost the same amount.
Oh my Lord. So how keen a cyclist are you? Let's just get into this because you work with elite performers, but you also are an elite performer yourself.
Yeah, that's right. So I race for a team called TAP Racing. So based in Surrey, we have an elite road and track cycling team. We race both in the UK and a little bit wider in Europe, mainly sort of Belgium and France and that kind of thing. But as I say, I race on the road predominantly with the shorter road races and the criterium, so the short closed circuit races, and also in the velodrome as well.
And then how does that link into what you do on the sports performance side of things?
Well, it gives me an insight from the athlete side of things. So I think that's the main thing from it is being able to not just think as the coach and developing an athlete, but also and then receive it from the other side from my own coach and giving me the same sort of direction and feedback that I give my athletes. So I can understand it from both sides of the fence, which I think is a good advantage in some aspects, because also questions come up where you really need to be able to relate to the person that you're coaching, and I find that that's really helpful, being able to see it from both perspectives.
Yeah, I guess that's why you look at some of, I guess from a pundit point of view, where they have people on the TV talking like in golf, football, I guess, and in cycling as well, where they're talking about the sport from their point of view of being behind the ropes, and it's a lot more relatable for the audience. Yeah. That's probably the same way you help people perform at the elite level.
Similarly, yeah, and there's quite a lot of successful coaches out there that either still compete and coach, or have come from a background of being an elite performer and gone into coaching, say similar to Simon Dyson, really. So obviously his accolades speak for themselves, and then going into creating the academy that he has done recently, and you as well, going through caddy, then golfer, and then coach. Similar thing, really. And there's quite a lot of people that come from that sort of side of things, and I do think it gives an edge, and that's not talking down to anybody that comes from a core coaching background, as I think that's a different thing entirely. But essentially what we're all trying to do is help people perform to the best of their abilities while not breaking them, really.
Okay, let's get into the first question, because this is a massive one. Most golf clubs have a medal round once a month, and it's the whole talk of the golf club. People are getting to the first tee a little bit nervous, a little bit more stressed out, and they really worry about how do they perform. Because if you look at all the top guys on TV, we're going to pick Rory McIlroy, Jason Day, Justin Johnson, John Ram. All these guys seem to get to the big events, so the majors, like a normal golfer's medal round, and just flick a switch, turn it on, and perform the best. Now, how do they do that?
Got to think of how experienced these guys are as well, but also how much work they do on the psychological side, whether that's with someone like Carl Morris, for instance, or one of us as Mindfactor coaches, but or whether they've worked on their own protocols that allow them to sort of zone in when the time comes when they need to, and like you say, flick that switch. Now it's a challenging area, really, because so many people are triggered by a variety of different things, and that honestly comes down to the individual. So as a coach, you need to really understand the individual that you're working with, what triggers them, and how to steer them back into the zone in order for them to play their best. like you say, coming onto the first tee is kind of it's a unique situation in itself, because it's not just any tee. It's the start of the match, start of the tournament. Everybody's looking at them, and nobody's seen anyone tee off yet, or nobody knows how anyone else is performing other than their scores from previous tournaments. That some athletes like to keep track of their competition, other athletes like to switch off completely, not see anything. And sometimes it becomes the coach's job to have a look at the competition as well, and then help manage what could be potentially expected on the day.
So most European Tour players will arrive to an event on a Monday and the event starts on a Thursday. So if we put this into kind of perspective, a lot of players will absolutely hammer their practice up until that Wednesday night. Now, you did some really interesting talk, I'm going to say back in November, was it now?
Yeah, November. Seems like
so long
time ago.
When you're at the Carl Morris, you did a chat for 2.5 hours talking about heart rate variability, stress management, and how that can help performance. And also about rest as well. And it's not something I'd ever really, obviously I knew rest is important, but I just thought, yeah, get a good night's sleep and you'll be right the next day. And I'm sure even the guys at the top peak level, they think the same thing. So how much of an impact does that have?
In terms of stress itself?
Yeah, in terms of stress, in terms of recovery.
So looking at stress and recovery, obviously you've got there are the two extremes of each other, really. And stress can be taken into, can be broken down into lots of different areas. Obviously, if you're looking at it from a physical point of view, we need to stress the body, then recover from it in order to progress. But then what you're alluding to there, more sort of the negative side of psychological stress, and can be detrimental to a game. I think I mentioned in the Brain Booster podcast I did last year, Jean van der Velde is a clear example of what can potentially happen if you start to lose the plot in game. So managing stress is a huge part of any athlete's performance, and can often be the deciding factor between winning and losing, even if if they're in tip-top physical and technical shape. So with something like heart rate variability, you can track on a day-to-day basis where your whole system is. So our body, if you think about the autonomic nervous system, we have our sympathetic and parasympathetic sides. Our sympathetic side, known as we all know as our fight-flight response, parasympathetic being our rest and digest response. And all our bodily, everything that stimulates around us, or everything that stimulates us, sorry, will trigger one of those two systems. So obviously this comes from evolution of back when we were in the Serengeti fighting saber-toothed tigers and rival tribes, but that has just now changed to peer pressure, social media, anxiety around performance, even down to the foods we eat and such like as well. And we can track that on a day-to-day basis, which then using that data, we can help narrow down the areas that we might need to work on. So if you take heart rate variability as a data measure day to day, hold a contextual diary at the same time. Most athletes have a training diary. If you don't, I'd recommend that you start keeping one, because it helps you reflect so well on what worked, what didn't work in the past, so that you can tailor make your approach for the next tournament or your next annual training plan, if it was at the end of the season. Remember, so I know we're talking about golf here, but for instance, like speed skaters are in their off season at the moment. So they've got another few months before they then go back into competition. So thinking about annual training plans, seasons, even the weather changing can change a response in the autonomic nervous system. But being able to track that from an objective data point of view, tracking subjective contextual data in terms of a training diary can really help figure out what stresses you out, what makes you what's kind of helping on the recovery on that relaxation side, and then allow you to target and pinpoint your efforts moving forward.
Okay, so you do this pretty much on a day-to-day basis with your elite cyclists. So just talk me through how you do that, because I think we're talking about just sport in general here, how people perform at an elite level. So talk me through, do they have monitors on? I know you sort of said they wear something, don't they? Or your guys, is it heart rate variability monitor? And then you look at this and look at the data to help kind of track when they need to rest more, they need to drink more water, or kind of look at different aspects, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. So for the easiest way to do it is to take a heart rate monitor that's able to give you a raw reading. So what we're looking for is to look at the RR intervals. So if you're looking at an ECG, it's the peak of an ECG trace that most people have probably seen at some point in their lives. And what we're looking at is the time distance between consecutive peaks. We're using that data, we can then put it through algorithms that then give us our reading of heart rate variability. So what we're looking for is obviously a higher heart rate variability, giving maybe more of an adapted organism, if we think of it from a raw level. And generally they get something like a Wahoo ticker is probably the cheapest thing on the market in terms of a chest strap that's able to take the raw data, and then using an app, something like Elite HRV. HRV for training is another one as well. Elite HRV for the basic app is free. HRV for training have a I think it's a cost on download, and then they have a subscription package as well. That's a monthly thing of about I can't remember how much it is. I think it's 10 or 15 pounds, which then allows you to analyze, post-analyze data and such like. But Elite HRV give you, or both of them, but Elite HRV give you an indicator of whether you're parasympathetic dominant, sympathetic dominant on a day-to-day basis. And generally I say that a minimum of 2 minutes monitoring upon waking up, but after going, there's a bit of a protocol around it. So for my athletes, they wake up, give it sort of 5 or so minutes to come around, because as we wake up, we have a cortisol rush. Cortisol would activate the sympathetic side of the nervous system, which is what we need to get up and go. They go to the loo because holding fluid in the bladder also has an effect. So get up, chill out, go to the toilet, and then sit down for a minute or so just to allow their body to relax, allow their heart rate itself to come down. Strap on the monitor, fire up the app, measure for around 2 minutes. The science behind it says that you can get a fairly accurate reading from around 60 seconds. But I like to get the guys, make sure that they're fully relaxed as well. Sometimes I go into the data and see that actually they haven't relaxed fully to start with. So I'll go in and manipulate the data and take the last 60 seconds perhaps, or something like that. But anywhere between 2 minutes and 5 is generally seen as the gold standard. And then use that information to then direct efforts day to day. And that doesn't mean fully changing someone's training plan. So you can still have if you're going by periodization, which most sports are accustomed to, doesn't mean that we can't have that and we need to do a new plan day to day. It just means we might tweak the effort or tweak the plan very slightly on a day-to-day basis to ensure that our athletes get the most out of that session, so that they can use effectively if we can think of HRV as your battery level, so that we can make the most efficient use of the energy that they have left, rather than pushing people potentially into the ground when they're not able to take it.
Because that's massive, isn't it? Because I'm even going to go to say a lot of elite golfers probably don't even realize this. We just think more golf balls, we're going to get better. Whereas you're looking at it from more of, and what I would say is more of a sport where it requires fitness. I know golf does require fitness, but from an aspect of golf, a lot of people think it's more of a skill rather than fitness. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely mad to say that, okay, right, so for example, for a cyclist, you're not quite 100% today, right? We're going to tone the training back. You're going to do the same, but you're going to do it for 2 hours today, not the 4 hours. And if golfers could do that, they would actually probably feel better in the mind, get more out of the practice, and actually probably peak at the right time, right?
Well, if we put it into a golfing context for you then, think of it more of a psychological thing. Our brains and our hearts are connected. So think that if you think about heart rate variability being actually, both of us are accustomed to waking up some days and feeling a bit groggy, but and everybody's exactly the same. You still might go to the range and go near 100 balls. Now, is that, say if your heart rate variability was low that day, is that the most efficient and effective use of your energy and your time? On those days where heart rate variability is low, it might be worth actually, say, maybe not getting the driver out, maybe not even hitting the range, maybe go to the putting green, work on some technique or around the putting, around skills and techniques, or whether you go and do practice getting out the bunker, something a little bit more physiologically, less physiologically loaded. And then on a day where you've got high heart rate variability, got a bit more in the tank, you can go and start smashing those balls and working on long driving, working on the long game. But you can use it in so many different contexts. It depends what works for the individual. So as a coach, it's really working with the individual to use heart rate variability as well as knowing the individual themselves. And I like, rather than think of things as strengths and weaknesses, I like to think of it as just areas of areas that people can improve on, and areas that they perhaps don't need to work on so much, so that we can work on both ends of the spectrum, but avoid the psychological downturn that it can be from saying that someone's weak from something, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So using heart rate variability, we can have a look on the days that we should be working on some strengths. We've got the capacity to do that, but also potentially then in the right psychological mindset to really drive home some of the areas from improvement as well. And you're in the right physiological state to take the adaptations that would give you. If you're going to go and work on areas from improvement, say like, I don't know, in a golfing context, say
chipping, for example.
Yeah, say take chipping for an example. Say it's an area of improvement. If your heart rate variability was really low and you had a lot to work on in that area, it might not be great to work on it that day, because you're not really in a state to adapt to it. You're more likely to maybe miss hit the ball. Technique's going to be a little bit off and such like. So you can really use it to dictate or help you manipulate certain sessions to make sure that you're always moving forward rather than taking 3 steps forward and 5 steps back, for instance.
I just think it's mad how, especially I thought this in November when you came, like, no one's doing this in golf, or no one's doing it and saying they're doing it, whereas you're doing it in cycling, speed skating, all different sports, Olympic athletes. Like, why aren't we doing this in golf? I know you're going to say, oh, I don't know, but like, it's crazy, because if you can make someone in cycling or any other sport perform at their optimal, then surely this is groundbreaking stuff for any sport, not just ones where we deem it to be more to do on fitness.
I think with golf, golf's an interesting and unique game in itself, where I know Carl uses the phrase of 90-10. And we spend, some of my friends, including yourself, spend a lot of time on the golf course and spend so much time around the technique of how to play golf, how to hit the ball, what the technique of driving, short game, putting, whatever it may be. However, you spend 90% of the time walking around between shots, but very little people work on that area of that 90%. If you're looking at using heart rate variability, it give you you can then structure your sessions geared towards, maybe, do you know what, I'm on a really low day, but I still want to work on something. I don't want to take the day off. Maybe I could work on my mental game a little bit, and start building that into the training plan, because so many people are just going out day by day working on physical technique and things. And I think that's where maybe this hasn't been as well adopted in sports like golf. There are others as well, but it does have the power to really transform the way that people train, both from a mental and a physical standpoint, and really dictate or help derive training programs with more specificity, so that we can make sure that each training session counts. So, and then when you get to tournament day, that first tee, you've got all the tools in your toolkit to pull from in order to make the right things happen.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. How much, look, you smart. How much as a percentage do you feel that this research and this much of preparation going into how you train, how you prepare, actually helps a performer? 10%, 20%? What is it?
Well, that's a difficult one to quantify, because it depends. Well, it's different with. Depends what your goal is, right? So
okay, with elite, you're one of your elite cyclists.
So how much does bringing technology into the game really help things?
Yeah.
when you're looking at elite performance, because the figures probably aren't going to wow people.
No, it's like, I mean, but 1%, bear in mind, 1% elite performance is like 50% for anybody else.
This is what I mean, is that at elite performance, you are at the top of an athlete's game, you are really looking for 0.5%, 1%, because they've also been training for so long that you're not going to make those massive leaps in performance that early amateur athletes are making. Say it's your first or second or third year, you're still continually growing at a rapid rate. So you are really looking at that sort of that 1%, and I'd say that this helps you direct to get to that 1%, probably potentially quicker.
Yeah.
So you're probably not looking at it being adding a huge amount to the game. What we're looking at here is making the most efficient use of time, so we get to that endpoint in a shorter duration of time.
No, like I said it before, I also think, and I'm going to mention it again, when in November, where you said you could look at one of your players' heart rate variability and you could tell them when they're going to get ill.
Yeah, so
I was like, what?
I've tracked colds up to 72 hours before anyone's felt a thing, and then pulled back training programs and taken days off a cold or potentially avoided it entirely, and they've just woken up feeling a little bit tired one day rather than coming out with a runny nose and a cough. One of my most, I guess, proudest moments is maybe a way to put it, I'm not sure, but I found one person intolerant to a multivitamin they were taking by tracking purely a 2-minute morning measurement over a period of a few weeks.
That's just crazy, because going into how golfers create a team. So at the minute, like a lot of golfers have the caddy at the elite level. They now have, some of them have a psychologist that they may work with in and out. A lot of them have a coach that travels with them. Now they're adding fitness coaches in there as well. So a lot of them have got their team. But I'm going to go back to it again. They don't seem to have somebody that looks at the technology to help them say, is their body ready for this? Are you ready to perform? Whereas a lot of them are just sort of going into the performance side of things, but that's more like, right, okay, how do I make the most of my practice? Not am I fit to practice?
I think a lot of the time, say you've got a singular athlete, say golf, and you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've got all these different people within this, let's say this performance environment that surrounds the athlete. Now in golf, this is a question for you, is that are those multiple entities, although they've all got the same goal, they want you to perform better, are they communicating?
Probably not. I'd say even at the top level, they're not. Now, I when I went to a training camp last year, they were trying to encourage golfers, PJ coaches like myself, to talk to physios, to work with sports psychologists. And at an elite level, yeah, it's probably easy to do so. But this is where the thing with golf and maybe in all sports as well. At a ground level, somebody just wants to get better at golf, and they don't see these other aspects contributing to that. But
I think there's potentially a role, say, like using the someone that uses the technology and can put all this data together and pull in the right person at the right time, almost like a performance manager.
Yeah.
And that could be a missing key. Maybe it's something I've certainly seen in other sports, whereby there are loads of people trying to do their bit, but it's pulling the athlete from pillar to post, rather than everything dialed as a collective effort and really putting on the right thing at the right time. Instead, it's very much a structured approach of, right, Tuesday morning I'm with this person, Wednesday afternoon I'm with this person.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they need to be with that person on that day. Those two might actually need to be swapped around, but there's no one there saying that should be happening in a lot of cases. So that role of a performance manager, or rather than being like a technical coach or a psychologist of bits and pieces, just an overall performance coach, perhaps, could be the missing key, maybe.
Definitely. And just to add to that, you've got a management group that will probably be telling you need to play this event, you've got to go and do an interview here, you've got to do that there. And I keep saying it, but it's mad. When I started out on tour caddying, I mean, it may have changed slightly between now and then, but I think what Simon was saying, it actually hasn't. It's crazy how you could, and for me, the top guys who are at the top of the game right now, they'll be at the top of the game regardless if they had a performance manager, say, we'll call it this role, or if they didn't, because these guys are just awesome. Maybe they would be at the top of their game for longer if they did. But for me, you could potentially, what I'm thinking of this is you could take a guy who's just got their European Tour card and turn them into a real good, not middle of the road, but I just, because it's not being a middle of the road European Tour player is fantastic. You're very, very good. But turning a middle of the road to potentially top 50 in the world tour player is what I think that this thing could do.
Quite potentially, but think about one thing you said there is that the guys that are at the top of the game are going to continue to be at the top of their game. That's right. But sport is constantly evolving. We're constantly seeing a new level. That bar gets pushed higher and higher, whether it's an annual thing, 5 years, a decade, whatever it might be. We are continually seeing improvements in the sport. A lot of that can be down to the technology that's being used. I know science and coaching methods is always evolving, but what if these guys could actually be at a whole nother level if this key person was involved, where each of these collective effort are individually trying to squeeze out this 1%, but potentially actually not moving an athlete forward, whether they're at the top of their game or not. Could we move the top performers forward another notch by making sure that these are all in the right order, brought in at the right times, using the right technology, and having that performance manager role? I think that'd be a really interesting thing a really interesting concept to potentially pursue, is that could the best be better if this was available?
I think so, yeah. 100%. 100%. Now, you alluded to that, changing technology. You've just actually started working for Chimera. Please tell me if I've pronounced that right or wrong.
Chimera, yeah.
Yeah. And you're actually wearing one of the hoodies now. So just tell us a little bit about this. I know Tim, who's the founder of this, can tell us a lot more, and hopefully we're going to get him on the show. Yeah. But tell us a little bit about what you're wearing and how actually that could help performance, recovery, and elite performers perform better.
Chimera is actually really interesting. Although my role is sales, I am not here to sell you this hoodie. However, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in what it was able to do. So brief background is Chimera is essentially a technology company that specialises in marrying IT technology and textiles to make smart garments. Started off from NASA research. Back in, I think it was 2006 or so, Tim first started looking into that for his own benefit, for his own needs initially, before he started to see how this could really be rolled out to help a lot of other people, essentially anybody and everybody. And what this hoodie has in it is it's infrared capability. So essentially it's a mix of 13 specific minerals that reharvest energy that would otherwise be wasted. So we waste on average around 60% of the energy that our bodies produce, and most of that's through heat through the skin, right? So what this does is the minerals are embedded to every part of the fabric. So everything that you can see here, as heat leaves the body, as it goes into the fabric, these minerals then turn that into infrared radiation, which then throws it back in through the skin. And as many people may know, far infrared is able to penetrate up to about 4 centimeters beneath the skin, and we get another 2 or 3 centimeters through blood perfusion and things like that. So and essentially what it does is, on a surface level, helps us perform better, recover faster, and also perform at a top level for longer. And the way it does that is that by having that infrared penetrating beneath the skin, it gives us about 20% uptake in tissue oxidization, increases blood circulation, and what I've found for it to do is allow me to train consecutive days at a higher level. So I don't have to go 2 days on, easy day, and then another day on before I have a rest day. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, I rode 5 days consecutively with no rest. And I haven't been on the bike for a while, just for personal reasons. So normally I'd be on my knees trying to do that. And it was like my legs were fresh every day. I got one of my athletes to to have some leggings. He was like, right, what is this stuff that you're looking at, that you're into now? And he said, give me some leggings and a top. And I did. And normally if you've got an athlete in the middle of a training program, especially when their load is going up, you're very unlikely to see personal bests coming out. It's really only get to that rest week and they've all the benefits have started to set in once they have that recovery time, that we start seeing some PBs maybe the week or so after. He was in the middle of a training program, did a VO2 max session on the Monday. I got a lot of words that I can't really say as we're on live right now, but I got a quite explicit text message on how he was feeling that evening. He put the leggings and his top on, and the next day did a race where he did a race online on Zwift, many of you may have heard of, and set a new lactic threshold that was about 5% higher than his last effort. And then I got another text message saying that he was absolutely ruined and on his knees after the race. And I was like, as you should be, you've done 2 days ridiculously hard. And I got a text the next morning after he slept in the leggings, and said that he could race again.
That's
so
mad.
The rate of recovery from using infrared technology is crazy. It's almost like an unfair advantage in some ways, although it's completely legit in any sport. So if you think of it compared to other things that we're more accustomed to, such as say compression is really is used at its best capabilities when you're still moving. Whereas with this, you can be sat on the sofa, you can be out for a jog, you can be anywhere doing anything or doing nothing, and it's still having a beneficial effect.
Like for a golfer, like it's well known that all these golfers travel hundreds of thousands of miles every year by plane. Like if you could sit in a plane and almost recover from the flight while you're on the flight, especially an overnight flight where you probably don't sleep very well, that's got to have like more than 1 or 2% effect on your performance. Got to. Like I've seen it.
Yeah, well, one of our clients did a sleep study with it and saw benefits by just purely wearing them overnight to sleep scores and pain scores the next day. So if you think we recover most when we're asleep, it's our chance where we formalize thoughts, store memories, and gives us our bodies a chance to repair itself. Imagine just being able to accelerate that so that you're able to perform at your best again, close to, if not your best or higher in my athlete's case, the next day. It's crazy. And especially as we get older, we a little bit slower at recovering overnight. So plans have to change as we age as athletes, and everyone knows that. But imagine then still being able to train hard the next day and not do, say, 1 day easy, 1 day hard, or whatever it may be. In a golf case, for instance, imagine going out to do 18 holes and potentially feeling a little bit tired the next morning. I know you said when you had Simon on here about something next year about doing consecutive days for charity. Imagine wearing something that you're waking up each day pretty much as fresh as the last, ready to go again on that first tee. And it'd be interesting to see, actually, now thinking about it, if we were able to, if say there's either one of yourselves or an elite athlete was wearing this kit and doing consecutive full 18 holes over the course of 3, 4, 5 days, as to what their scores would likely be. And if they'd have done it, if they'd done it previously, it's to compare the two and see if there's more consistency. I'd probably put money on the fact that it would be.
I would, just listening to you and listening to what we had in November. I think we're just scratching the surface with this.
I think so too, and then we've got a lot of stuff in R&D at Chimera as well, which I think if Tim's on here, he'll be able to do a big science deep dive on the infrared and the other capabilities that we're working on. But the future of sport, being able to use this technology, is, I think that what we were talking about earlier with, if could we make the best better? Yeah. I think yes is the answer with what I've seen is going on.
That's so exciting. Thanks for your time, Kieran. I really appreciate it. It's been
no worries. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you very much. And guys, thank you for joining me today. I know we've just scratched the surface on that, but I think that gives you a real good insight to what happens at the elite level and how everybody's trying to push the boundaries higher. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow.